Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. 2022 has been very hot. In North America, Europe, and Asia, extreme heat waves have occurred over the past few months. But why? Why is 2022 so hot? In this episode, I'm going to help you understand this extreme weather while introducing you all to some useful vocabulary. You can find a full transcript for free on the Thinking in English blog. Check out my Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast. And if you want to, please subscribe to my Patreon. You can search Thinking in English Podcast or click the link in the description. Lots of bonus episodes uploaded onto my Patreon. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on my blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Scorching. Scorching. Very hot. For example, it was a scorching summer day. Unbearable. Unbearable. Too painful or unpleasant for you to continue to experience. As in, I was in unbearable pain after I burned all of my fingers. Humidity. Humidity. Humidity is a measurement of how much water there is in the air, such as the temperature is 30 degrees and the humidity is 60%. Searing. Searing. If something such as a feeling or temperature is described as searing, it is extreme. For example, the marathon took place in the searing heat. Consider. Consider. To believe to be. To think of as. For example, this restaurant is considered to be the best in the world. Unprecedented. Unprecedented. Never having happened or existed in the past. As in, 40 degrees Celsius was an unprecedented temperature in the UK. Intense. Intense. Extreme and very strong. It is difficult to work in the intense heat. To adapt. To adapt. To change or to change something to suit different conditions or uses. As in, I had to adapt my plans to fit his schedule. I currently live in Japan. While it has rained a lot over the past few weeks, we had scorching hot temperatures in June. Japan is known for its sweltering and uncomfortable summers, but this June was the worst heat wave in the country since records began in 1875. Consecutive days of over 35 degrees Celsius, with some parts of the country reaching 40 degrees, made going outside unbearable. In Tokyo, where I live, it reached around 38 degrees. Now, that might not sound as hot as other places around the world, but Tokyo's humidity is often around 80% in June. To give you some context, 38 degrees Celsius at 70% humidity feels roughly equivalent to your body to 49 degrees Celsius at 30% humidity. You can check out some of the data if you click on the link in the blog. It was so hot that Japan nearly ran out of power, had to ask shops to turn off lights, but couldn't ask people to turn off their air conditioning because the temperatures were too dangerous. Earlier this year, in March, India and Pakistan faced an extreme heat wave too. The hot season arrived early, with temperatures reaching 49 degrees Celsius in the Pakistani city of Nawabshah, with both countries also experiencing a drought at the same time. Right now, China is experiencing its second heat wave this month. The daily temperatures are the highest since 1961, and 70 Chinese cities have issued severe heat warnings, meaning they expect temperatures to reach at least 40 degrees. In fact, the city of Guangzhou has announced that they expect the current heat wave to last 23 days. Europe has also faced record-breaking temperatures. Temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius were recorded in the UK for the first time ever. The heat was so bad in Britain, a country not designed to experience such extreme weather, that schools had to be closed. Airport runways melted and trains could not run, as there were fears that the tracks would break. In mainland Europe, temperatures reached even higher numbers. The heat wave was felt across Europe, from Portugal in the west across to Spain, France, Italy, Greece, and Turkey. Combined with weeks of drought, the heat wave allowed massive and devastating wildfires to spread across these countries. And in the USA, 90 million people are currently under heat alerts due to dangerously high temperatures. It is one of the hottest ever summers in that country, and a number of people have already died due to the searing temperatures. I'm sure I've missed some places out, but I'm also sure that you get my point. The world is hot, very hot, and this heat is being felt all across the world. Millions, if not billions, of people are struggling to continue their normal lives under extreme weather conditions. But why? Why are there so many heat waves? The simple explanation is climate change. Climate change and global warming have made heat waves across the world more frequent and more dangerous. By burning fossil fuels, we have introduced more CO2 into our atmosphere, basically trapping in the heat. The idea that the UK could reach 40 degrees was considered impossible a few decades ago. When I was young, a really hot day was anything over 30. However, as the world has become increasingly warm, these really hot temperatures have been occurring more frequently. Even more concerning, the heat waves today are reaching temperatures that were once considered impossible. The temperature in the UK earlier this month was remarkable. The UK should not be able to get that hot. According to currentresults.com, the average high temperature in London in July is 23 degrees. That's considerably lower than the 39 degrees it reached last week. In fact, scientists at the UK Met Office, the UK's weather research department, believe that human influence has made the chances of the UK reaching 40 degrees 10 times higher. Last year, the Pacific Northwest, so parts of the USA and Canada, experienced a similarly extreme heat wave. The temperatures were completely unprecedented. One town called Lytton usually averages just 16 degrees in June, but last year hit a terrifying 47.9 degrees, the hottest ever temperature recorded in Canada. Research carried out by the World Weather Attribution Group has demonstrated that without climate change, that heat wave would have been virtually impossible. According to Mariam Zakaria, an Imperial College London climate scientist, there are two main ways climate change can lead to heat waves. First, as I mentioned before, climate change traps heat that would usually escape from the global system. With more heat in the world, the atmosphere gets warmer in general, and this means that there will be more frequent and more intense days of extreme heat. Second, there is a dynamic impact of climate change. Burning fossil fuels, releasing more CO2 into the atmosphere, and warming the planet has changed our weather patterns. Historic patterns of heat and cold, rainy and dry seasons are changing. Places across the world are experiencing certain types of weather at unusual times. Changing weather patterns was a major cause of this year's European heat waves, as scorching hot North African air was unexpectedly brought up to Europe. Something else that becomes obvious when considering the global temperatures is that heat waves are happening at the same time in different parts of the world. Japan, China, all of Europe, North America, they all experienced extreme heat together. This is something that scientists have noticed and has caused a lot of concern. A study conducted by Australian and American researchers discovered that between 1979 and 2019, the average number of days in the Northern Hemisphere with simultaneous, so at the same time, heat waves increased from around 20 days to 143 days. To put it simply, there are now 7 times more simultaneous heat waves across the Northern Hemisphere. These heat waves are also more intense and more extreme. But why is this happening? The first reason for more simultaneous heat waves is simple statistics. Due to global warming, the chances of a heat wave occurring anywhere in the world is more likely. And this also means that the chances of 2 heat waves occurring at the same time is also more likely. However, data suggests that concurrent heat waves in Asia, Europe, and North America are happening too often, even when considering global warming. Instead, some studies suggest that climate change is having other effects that contribute towards heat waves. For example, some scientists believe that climate change has changed the jet streams, air currents that move from the west to the east. These changes mean it is more likely that hot weather can now hit multiple places at the same time. But does it really matter if we have more frequent and more intense heat waves? Surely it might be nice to have warmer temperatures in summer, right? Well, while I don't believe this was actually something conservative newspapers and TV channels were saying while the UK was experiencing 40-degree weather. Well, the consequences of heat waves are often disastrous. Thousands of people can die. Millions more can experience ill health. Businesses and industries struggle as both workers and customers can't deal with warmer temperatures. Heat waves can cause crops to fail, harming food production. This is especially true if hot weather occurs at the wrong time of the year, such as in India and Pakistan earlier this year. Heat waves also are associated with droughts and a lack of rain. If heat waves were to hit important food production areas at the same time, there could be regional or even worldwide food shortages. As we saw in the UK, transport was severely affected by the heat wave. The runways at airports melted, causing delays. Trains were cancelled or were forced to reduce their speeds as the tracks got too hot. This year, the Rhine River in Europe, which is a vital trade route, has become so shallow that some boats are struggling to pass through it. Heat waves also test energy grids. As I mentioned right at the beginning, last month Japan advised residents to save energy by turning off lights. An earthquake earlier this year damaged a few power plants, and Japan has now been left struggling to meet the demand for electricity when everyone is using air conditioning. Similarly, last week in China, factories were forced to use less power to make sure residents had enough energy for air conditioning. So, what should we do? The world today is on average 1.1 to 1.3 degrees Celsius hotter than before industrialization. And by the year 2100, the world will likely be at least 1.5 degrees warmer, but maybe even warmer than that. Even if governments reduce their emissions, extreme heat waves will continue to happen more often. In reality, it's unlikely governments will actually cut their CO2 emissions at all. So, just hoping that we stop polluting the atmosphere is not enough. We need to adapt our societies to climate change. We need to accept our world is becoming more unpredictable and dangerous, and we need to make changes. Some of the changes need to be short term to deal with the immediate dangers of a heat wave. For example, some European countries made places with air conditioning free to enter, like museums, concert halls, and exhibitions. This is especially important or useful in places like the UK, as it is quite rare for houses to have air conditioning in the UK. Other ideas include giving out free water or installing more water fountains in busy cities, checking the condition of vulnerable people, and making sure homeless people are healthy. We also need long term changes, planting more trees in cities, designing new homes so that they resist heat better, improving weather forecasting so we can predict the next heat wave, and making improvements to existing buildings and transport are all important steps. We also need to consider how best to work, study, and live in a warmer world. So here is today's final thought. After listening to this episode, hopefully you will understand why heat waves are happening more often. Across the planet, temperatures are soaring and the consequences can be serious. Climate change has increased the frequency of heat waves, the intensity of heat waves, and has made it more likely for heat waves to happen in multiple places at the same time. What can we do? Well, even if countries cut their emissions, heat waves will continue to get worse over the next 100 years. In this situation, our only choice is to adapt. Our world needs to get better at dealing with hot weather. We need to design houses that stay cool in the summer, heat resistant transport, and we need to plant trees in the cities. Has your country faced a heat wave this year? What temperature did your country get to? How do you think we should deal with heat waves in the future? Let me know your opinions and your answers to these questions by leaving a comment on the blog, a comment on Spotify, or you can send me a message on Instagram. As you probably heard at the beginning of the episode, I have recently launched my Patreon. I already have a few members, but I'd love a few more of you to join. We're going to start discussion groups. I'm uploading bonus episodes. You'll get unedited interview episodes when I interview other people. I'm going to be sharing some of the behind the scenes things to thinking in English, offering English classes, And I'm thinking of working with a few other English teachers to maybe offer really regular discussion groups and things like that. So, if you're interested in supporting Thinking in English, if you enjoy listening to me, please consider subscribing. For the price of a coffee a month on Patreon, you can kind of help me to turn this into a job and continue doing this after September. Because after September, I kind of need to find a job and I might not have enough time to be doing Thinking in English, especially if I'm doing it for free. So, yeah, if you're, please consider subscribing to the Patreon. Um, if if you don't want to, that's fine. Just go over to Instagram and give me a follow on Instagram, and make sure you leave a like, a review, and a rating wherever you are listening right now. I'm very close to 1,500 ratings on Spotify. So if you can go and give me a rating on Spotify, give me a 5 stars. I'm very close to getting 1.5 thousand, which is amazing. So thank you, and I hope you have a good week.